you're having this conversation of CMOs with bigger remits and bigger jobs. And that's all tied to the fact that the customer experience and the data and technology of what a marketer does is now integral into how a company operates.
Thank you, Matt. So thank you for having me, as always. Yeah, Matt and I have collaborated on many events, some of mine, some of his, and it's always great to be back. And it's also great to be back with a longtime friend, Karna Crawford. I'm not going to talk about myself at all, so let's jump right into introductions and give us a little bit of your background and a day in the life.
Sure. First of all, thank you guys for coming back after the eclipse. I know some part of you was like, I'm already outside. It's really lovely. Thank you. So I'm Karna Crawford. I am the Chief Marketing Officer of Marqeta. I've been there since June of last summer, and it's my first experience in B2B marketing. My background is very much driving marketing transformation and digital transformation in Fortune 50 and larger companies, most recently as the head of US marketing for Ford. Prior to that, the head of media activation for Verizon Wireless and Verizon Fios, and marketing strategy at JPMorgan Chase for the consumer bank, among other things.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Karna, and it's great to see you, and always great to be on stage with you. I always like to start with what's top of mind today, maybe besides the eclipse or the earthquake recently. It's all this natural phenomenon in New York lately.
Well, I think we're one step away from an apocalypse. So, interestingly, I will actually say one thing about the eclipse that I was mentioning to you earlier. It wasn't until today or yesterday that I remembered when I was in elementary school and an eclipse had come before, and I did the little, the pin-sized hole in the cardboard box, et cetera, et cetera. That was my last eclipse experience. And now I'm looking at like all the science that we have, all of the flights that have been created, the way people have monetized this eclipse into a real thing, unlike anything I've ever seen in my life.
I was waiting for the article of how will AI impact the eclipse.
I'm sure it's coming.
But I'm not going to ask that. What I would like to start with, because a lot of people may not know what Marqeta is, so just give us a brief background on what Marqeta is.
Absolutely. So Marqeta is a fintech payments company. We are a public company at about a $3 billion-ish market cap, IPO'd in 2021 at the height of the fintech boom. What we do is effectively we are a card, so think debit card, credit card, issuer and processor that can do it in a modern way, especially with virtual cards. The best way to think about it, if you're not like a payments geek in the space like some of us are, is we power 7 out of probably, actually I should say this differently. 70% of Americans have used an app that Marqeta's capabilities power in the past month. Some of the examples that we power are, we power the Cash App card. We power the Dasher card, so the card that a DoorDash Dasher uses to go and pick up your food in the background that you never see. We power that, et cetera, et cetera. What we are doing now, though, is taking the idea of card payments and helping brands and companies transform their customer experiences by embedding financial services technology seamlessly into their brand experiences, and that's called embedded finance. What that allows us to do is help brands fundamentally change how much ownership of the relationship and the data that they have with their customers they actually can maintain directly versus spreading that out to a loyalty company, a bank, et cetera.
Great, thank you. So we're going to dive into a few specific issues, but the session title is the Strategic CMO. The CMO role has evolved over many years, and you've been on that path and then now have these jobs. We see whether it's Rajesh Subramanian at FedEx is now the CEO, Jonathan Craig at Schwab took over all product, now runs a division. We're seeing a lot of CMOs their jobs are becoming more strategic, whether it's as CMO or even being elevated into other positions. How do you sort of see the role of the CMO today, and maybe even compared to as you started on this journey sort of years ago?
Yeah. So I knew in my career that I always wanted to be a CMO. I started very young, classic brand kind of track. But back then, CMO meant driving beautiful storytelling and your core KPI. When I was at, for instance, Coca-Cola, one of my core KPIs was around the storytelling. Now, while storytelling is still a critical aspect of what we do as a marketing organization and as a CMO, the greatest value and the greatest longevity comes from how you are demonstrating your ability to drive the business value. And I think when there are two things that are happening right now in the CMO space. You're having this conversation of CMOs with bigger remits and bigger jobs. And that's all tied to the fact that the customer experience and the data and technology of what a marketer does is now integral into how a company operates. You cannot separate the marketing data and aspects of the customer experience from the commerce aspect, from the back-end operational aspect, and all of a sudden, what a CMO's remit can increase. At the same time, though, you've also got companies who are starting to lose faith in the value of a CMO. And I think what's really happening there are the instances where the same thing is occurring, this remit of understanding the customer experience and what the story is that your brand stands for and how you tell it, and the connectivity of that to e-commerce or the connectivity of that to ops and logistics for the business, et cetera. That's all happening. It's just some people are choosing to expand the CMO remit to chief commercial officer or et cetera, and others are choosing to fold that remit into something else like chief operating officer and so on. And I think that switch makes sense from the perspective of marketing can't just be about the storytelling without being tied to how it operationalizes.
Do you think that we're trending too far into the strategic CMO perhaps taking on too much? Or is it too much ownership over too many of the disciplines and functions? Or does this make sense for the marketer, the chief marketer, if you will, to oversee customer experience, to oversee PR and comms, to oversee product, whatever it might be? Is there a limit? Does it stretch the CMO too much?
Don't all marketers want to take over the world? I mean, I think it depends on how that role is set up inside of that organization. I mean, in the past, there have been instances where CMOs did not report directly to the CEO. And so some of what's happening is simply the remit is expanding and they are elevating to the CEO level. And what makes that any different for the CMO with an expanded remit than from a CFO or a COO, et cetera? At the reality, what I think is really happening is the role of marketing is elevating inside of the organizations that understand that intersection of marketing and operations, and therefore the remit is expanding with it. And in most instances, so is the organization and the function, and therefore they're overseeing business units.
Are there skill sets, soft skills, where there are gaps as you were sort of being elevated into CMO roles where you would recommend to people, look, it could be something like, learn how to be a better negotiator. It could be more familiar with a P&L and M&A. Is it, what would you say as the role becomes more strategic, as there's more responsibility, particularly for business growth and managing risk too, right? What skills would you suggest to people that they look to add beyond sort of traditional marketing skills?
Well, first, yes, and yes. I think for me, as I have thought about my career as a CMO and elevating into my role as a CMO, the first thing that was most important to me was understanding the business operation, understanding the financials, and then understanding data and technology. That, for me, is the foundation of being able to then identify how marketing intersects with the rest of the business and how marketing can help drive business value. So if you are someone who has focused very heavily on storytelling, on the advertising aspect of it, that is important. But I don't think that the future of CMO will be able to exist solely through that lens. So I would focus on understanding that while also understanding how to think about that and its impact on the business value and the growth of the business and the P&L.
And also, I'm going to come to the audience relatively early for questions because ultimately this is for you. So think about a question if you have one brewing. Let's dig in one layer deeper, sort of. Yeah. You and I have talked a lot just one-on-one and on stage and in lots of different places about customer experience and CX. And as you come in as a CMO, do you have a framework for when you're sort of looking at the customer experience, broader organization? Obviously, you've been at Chase, Verizon, Coca-Cola, Ford, and Marqeta, completely different types of customer service operations and overall CX operations. But do you come in, do you do an audit of some kind when you're like a CMO? How do you sort of audit the CX sort of function, capabilities, weaknesses, as you come in, and how do you roll out a sort of a CX program, or what is your framework?
Yeah, I think I have a framework that I've kind of organically fallen into moving from role to role. Maybe I'll write a book about it one day, but it's probably not that scientific. I think a couple of things are important. First, I start everything through the lens of the customer's needs and how effectively the organization is or is not meeting those needs. I don't start necessarily with how much money are we making or where is the profit. That's not my starting place. My starting place is, what do customers need and expect? And then what data and information do we have that helps me understand how effectively we are delivering on what they need and expect? And then I start to unpeel the layers behind that. That then starts to go into, of the things they need and expect, where do we make money versus not? Where is it more profitable for us versus not? What are the barriers in our experience, and why have we not or chosen to exploit those, to either overcome those barriers or exploit those opportunities? I do everything from the outside in, which is a fundamental shift from what most companies do when they are assessing situations, which tend to come from the inside, my product, and my P&L outwards. I also focus a lot of attention on the MarTech stack in that assessment. So understanding, do we have complete visibility into that experience and the performance of that customer decision experience? If we don't, where are the barriers? And that's where I start uncovering what we need to start to focus on in terms of the experience. The piece of it that I didn't speak to is the storytelling piece. That the audit I do with that tends to be a combination of, what does the customer say? In the instances where I have an agency, what's my agency's point of view about what we're saying, what we're not saying, and how we may need to adapt it? And then what's my organization's point of view? And I triangulate those things in order to identify my own perspective of, where is our greatest opportunity and how do we actually dig into that opportunity to move to a positive or more favorable customer experience and NPS scores. The question for anybody who may not have heard is, given everything I just said, how am I measuring that impact of marketing on the business and the business value? A great example is what I've done at Marqeta. When I came into Marqeta, marketing was undervalued. The CFO did not necessarily respect or appreciate the data that marketing was communicating. We were focusing on what people will sometimes call vanity metrics, things that are about the activity and not about the business impact, et cetera. The first thing I did was understand from our MarTech stack what attribution we can actually find. In my instance, we're B2B. So where can I tangibly see the connection between a marketing activity or a marketing output tying to an actual sale that was generated? And then based on where I saw gaps in that MarTech stack, we went and retooled the stack. The second thing that we did was to define KPIs. We didn't have clear marketing KPIs. So I worked with a combination of my RevOps organization, my sales leadership, and my CFO to define clearer KPIs that were tied to the marketing activities ROI, the marketing activities expected pipeline value, and all of the conversion rates that send underneath that, and then started holding my team accountable towards those KPIs. What I've helped the team understand is the difference between what you track and what you measure. You measure the end KPI. How effectively did this thing do at driving revenue, driving profit, driving a new account into the business? What you track is which activities did that better or worse, more efficiently, less efficiently, et cetera. And that has really shifted culturally how we measure. And it has allowed us to be able to show data in front of my CFO that he could feel more confident in and have more confidence in our rigor behind it. And therefore, He's slowly inching towards understanding the value and the impact that marketing is having on the overall go-to-market performance and success.
And real quick, before I go to one more question, and this is off script a little bit, but just what you said, how do you audit a MarTech stack when you come in?
How do
you
I
audit a MarTech? We've talked about auditing like a team, like you inherit a team and it's like, okay.
Yeah.
How do you audit a MarTech stack as a CMO?
So for me, the first thing I do is I ask for a visual. I'm a highly visual person. I was an engineer by trade, but I do everything through visuals. So the first thing that I do is actually take a look at the visual of the stack so I know what we have. And then I have people walk me through what data is coming in and what data is flowing out. And then walk me through the life of a lead. That allows me to see where we actually have gaps, where we have things that where we may have gaps in the stack, gaps in how we're using the stack, or gaps in our visibility. And that then allows us to define a roadmap that you can then build towards a strong, transparent stack. How do I audit a team? For me, I do a couple of things. When I come into a new organization, before I even come in the door, I'm doing a little bit of team assessment. I'm asking questions early on with the CEO or whoever the people are that I'm meeting with. What are their perceptions of the team? How is the team thought about? Who's the strongest talent? Where are the weakest things? So that I'm getting, not only am I getting some knowledge about the team itself, I'm getting some knowledge about how the organization thinks of and respects or doesn't respect that team. The second thing that I do is I spend a lot of time with the leadership team and understanding not only how do they think about the work that they're doing, but how do they tell the stories to me? How do they help me understand what they're driving and what that drives for the business? That is helping me not only audit the hard skills, the capabilities from a marketing perspective, it's also helping me audit how they think about the business and how effectively they can influence the business with the marketing activities. And then I work with my leadership team once I have that perspective to then do the same thing throughout their organization, to have a really clear view of where do we have strengths and where do we have weaknesses. It is a thing that people don't like to talk about, but it's real, and it's important that you do it, and you do it early. You need to identify early where you have weaknesses or where you have misaligned seats on the bus, right, and change them immediately, or it will pull you down too quickly, and then all of a sudden, you're not able to achieve what you want out of that new opportunity.
And also, speaking of quickly, if you can answer this follow-up quickly, and same thing with upskilling. So you've inherited a team, maybe there's some turnover, and you've talked about upskilling for a very long time. You and I always talk about this. So do you have a framework, a playbook in terms of how you then, okay, we're going to upskill this person, these people, and how does that happen?
So I'm actually doing it right now as we speak. I've got an amazing team of people, but they have not been a data-centric, analytically oriented, result-oriented team. And so I have to build a culture and a capability around it. There are a couple of things that I'm doing. One is bringing outside people into the organization to become a part of that team. So I've made a couple of talent changes so that people see this, and I'm starting to embed it in the culture. Second thing that I do is work together with my learning and development or HR team to define what are the skills that we have versus need, and then build out a learning plan. Depending on the company I've been at, in some places I've been in very large organizations, and therefore I have a really rich bed of training and learning and development at my ready in-house, and we'll just build off of that. In other instances, like where I am at Marqeta, we are a smaller organization, so we're building out a program together with the ANA and LinkedIn for me to do some upskilling with the team. And then the third thing that I do is ensure that I am providing funds for people to focus on individual upskilling and making sure that they feel invested in some areas that they specifically are choosing to learn and develop for themselves inside of that program.
That's great. We are at time, a little over, but I'll be remiss as I know, this is really good. We could go another hour. I'll be remiss as a moderator if I don't ask one quick, very, very quick AI question. And I'm just only going to ask it this way. How is AI positively impacting, helping you in your job today? One specific thing. It could be something very simple. We don't need to wax on about the future of AI, but how's it helping you today?
AI is helping us accelerate the pace with which we can produce content, and scale content above what my very paltry marketing budget can afford.
It's not a Ford budget, is it?
It's not a Ford, but it is not a Ford budget.
Anyway, we could talk forever, as always, and it's been great. I know we've been doing this for like 10 years on stage, so it's also been great to talk about your journey over the last decade, and we're gonna keep on doing it. Round of applause for Karna Crawford.
Thank you guys so much for your time.